In the 19th century, a single idea completely gripped America. And it wasn't just a political belief, it was like a force of nature. It was called manifest destiny. This idea moved borders, it sparked wars, and as we're going to see, it ultimately pushed a young nation right to its breaking point.
So, what exactly was Manifest Destiny? Well, at its heart, it was this really powerful conviction that the United States had a divine, almost preordained mission to expand its borders and spread its ideals all the way across the North American continent. It wasn't just a good idea, it was inevitable.
And this is the guy who gave the idea its famous name. In 1845, a journalist named John L. O'Sullivan wrote this. He just perfectly captured the ambition and that sense of divine mission that was in the air. This phrase became a rallying cry for an entire generation. But that brings us to the central question we're really digging into today. Because this dream of a coast-to-coast republic, well, it turned out to be a classic double-edged sword.
Okay, so first things first, let's look at the idea itself. Where did this incredibly powerful ideology actually come from?
Now, while O'Sullivan gave it that catchy name in 1845, the idea itself had been simmering for decades. Look at this. As early as 1803, people were already talking about America's future destiny. By the 1820s, you had a congressman just flat out declaring the Pacific Ocean our natural boundary. This belief was kind of baked into the nation's DNA from the very start. But this whole belief system was about way more than just grabbing land. It was this really potent mix. You had a sense of a God-given duty to expand democracy, but that was combined with a very deeply ingrained belief in Anglo-American cultural and racial superiority. And frankly, this was the logic that was used to justify displacing the Native American and Mexican peoples who already called these lands home. So let's see how this powerful idea went from just political talk to sparking one of the largest and most dangerous migrations in American history. Just look at that number, 250,000. By 1860, 250,000 people had packed everything they owned into covered wagons to chase this continental dream. We're talking about journeys of thousands of miles, driven by this promise of a new life out west. But the reality of that journey was just brutal. This was no romantic adventure. More than 1 out of every 10 travelers, over 34,000 people, never even made it. And the biggest killers? They weren't what you see in the movies. It was the relentless daily grind of disease, accidents crossing rivers, and just exposure to the elements. And behind these staggering numbers were just countless personal tragedies. This one diary entry from a woman on the trail, it just captures the heartbreaking reality of it all. She wrote, "There was a woman died in this train yesterday. She left 6 children, one of them only 2 days old." Just imagine. So with this huge popular movement underway, it was only a matter of time before it became a potent political weapon, one that would end up electing a president and literally redrawing the map of America. The presidential election of 1844 was a huge turning point. For years, politicians had been tiptoeing around annexing Texas because, well, it meant dealing with the explosive issue of slavery. But in 1844, expansionism just took over. It became the central issue, and there was no turning back. So the Democrats nominate this dark horse candidate, James K. Polk, and he turns out to be a master strategist. He did something brilliant. He linked the northern desire for the Oregon Territory with the southern demand for Texas. His slogan, 54-40 or fight, which was all about the northern border of Oregon, was super aggressive and wildly popular. This 2-part expansion plan was just enough to get him into the White House. But Polk's victory and all the expansion that followed came at a staggering cost. You see, acquiring a continental empire had immense and often violent consequences for the people and for the environment of the West. To get a sense of the ecological impact, just look at the explosion in the buffalo hide trade. In the 1820s, it was a few thousand hides a year. By the 1840s, it's skyrocketing towards 100,000. This wasn't just hunting for food. It was an industrial-scale slaughter that ripped apart the very cornerstone of the Plains Indians' way of life. And you can see how the impact on the native nations was just transformative in every way. The arrival of horses, for example, it increased mobility, but it also created new social divisions. Diseases like smallpox were absolutely catastrophic. And then you throw in guns and trade, and the entire political and economic landscape was just rewired, with truly devastating long-term consequences.
And this is where we get to the ultimate tragic irony of this whole story. The very success of Manifest Destiny, getting all this new land, it created a crisis the nation just couldn't solve. The land that was meant to unite the country actually held the seeds that would tear it apart.
And here's the fundamental conflict. Every single new piece of land forced this question. Would it be a free territory, based on the North's vision of capitalism and free labor? Or would it be a slave territory, built on the South's vision of a society based on slavery? These were two completely irreconcilable futures for America, and they were on a collision course.
The result? Well, passion replaced compromise. The era of negotiation and deal-making that had held the Union together for decades was just over. The debate over slavery in these new territories became this brutal, passionate fight where neither side was willing to back down an inch.
And the rhetoric in Washington became incredibly vicious and personal. I mean, we're not talking about polite debate here. It was just outright character assassination on the floor of the United States Senate. And what happened next is just shocking. The South Carolina colleague's relative, who was a congressman, walked into the Senate chamber and beat Senator Sumner nearly to death with a heavy cane. I mean, think about that. That brutal act of violence showed that the political system itself was completely breaking down. Words had failed, and now physical force was taking over. Which leaves us with this final, tragic question. Manifest Destiny did achieve its goal. It created a continental nation, but in doing so, it unleashed forces and exposed divisions over slavery that would lead the country directly into the Civil War. It was a dream of unity, but it was paid for with the price of profound, unimaginable division.